Hello, writers, and welcome to Writing for Screens, today's live episode. How do I choose words? Also known as writing style. My name is... wrong button. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything here at Writing for Screens, a channel in which I have tried to take the skills and tools and insights that I had to figure out for myself in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. I'm trying to take those things and pass them on, leave them behind as I leave the business of screenwriting, start writing a novel. I'm going to share my process as I do that. But on my way out of the business, I put together for this channel, here's a screen grab of the page, 50 lesson videos. Each one of them is a short lesson, about 10 minutes long. Hold on, I'll give you a close-up. And these lessons are gathered in these three first playlists as you scroll down on the page. The first one is called Screenwriting Essentials. The second is Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft. And the third one is The Process, Being a Writer. These are 50 10-minute lessons. Each one has its own topic, very specific genre, flashbacks, dialogue. Whatever it is, I've tried to make it very clear. I've made it the title. I've made it the thumbnail, great big bold letters so that you can see it. You can choose it. I urge you, I beg you to take a look at all these because they are very valuable. Pretty much everything I have to say is in them. But then, having done those, I started to do live streams, and now I come on live every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone to talk about a new topic every week and to do some AMA Ask Me Anything, almost. So that's what we're doing here today. Today's topic is about something that I'm struggling with. I was working on it this morning, and I said, let's talk about this. Because it would seem like somebody who's been a professional for many years and feels very, very comfortable and fluent writing, that this would not be a problem. It still is. The only thing you need to completely destroy your confidence is to shift into a different style or mode or art form, and that's what I'm doing. So that's what we're going to talk about. First, some hellos. Good morning to Hasko, not the pirate. I'm glad that you could make it live too. Hello, Nishaj and Sonia. Nishaj is exciting for this topic because he's trying to figure out his own. Yeah, me too. So we can share that together. Hello, Lake Filter. Very good to see you. Okay, great to see all of you. It is wonderful to have you here. Let us get to business. Here's the business. The basic question, which seems so painfully obvious, it's like, how could you not know this, is how do you choose what words to write? Because really, honestly, when people talk about having writer's block, this is usually the actual problem. And the way that this has come up for me is I have spent a long time, I've been talking about this for over a year now, making an outline, figuring out every single scene. I feel very confident that I know what happens in the story and that I like it. I think it's good. And yet, when I try and write it, it is not that easy. I'm going to show you exactly what kind of problems I've been running into, because the basic idea is that what you think of as your style, what you think of as the way to write, oh, this is how you write. This is actually an internalized external style. In other words, if you are a screenwriter, you will have read a bunch of screenplays and said, that's how they do it. This is the kind of sentence they write. This is the kind of structure that they have for a paragraph, for a scene, whatever it is. Likewise, if you write novels, you will find yourself gravitating towards what you think is the style, the natural style, the correct style. But it's not. In screenwriting, there is generally a style that is commonplace, approved, whatever you want to call it. First of all, in screenwriting, you have very narrow parameters. You're only allowed to write in present tense. You are not allowed to write much of what the character is thinking. There's a lot of limits, which in fiction writing all go away. You can write first, second, or third person. You can write present tense or past tense. You can mix tenses. You can mix points of view. You can do long sentences or short sentences. You can get all into somebody's thought process, or you can describe the external. All of it is open. It's possible. It's legit, and that is actually paralyzing. So the way that most of us solve it, and if you don't have this problem, that's fine. What that means is that you've found a style which you've read a lot of, or in some way you've absorbed, internalized, chosen a certain voice that you like. Could be very conversational, could be very formal. Does not matter. There are so many. And if you have that, that's cool. It took me a long time, but in screenwriting over time, I built the voice. I knew how to write a screenplay. Right now, if I were to write this novel that I'm writing as a screenplay, I would be ripping through it. The problem I'm running into is I am not confident of the voice that this particular story should be in. And so I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about that. I see that there's a bunch of other questions showing up. I will get to those, but I want to focus on this topic for the first section of this live stream, and then I will get to your questions. I see them, but let's talk about this situation, because here's my chapter. Here's what I'm working on. Okay, this is my this is a scene in the second part of the book, in which the main character, who has been he's been in love with this very rich young woman who is in love with a painter, and the hero has become friends with the painter, partners actually, in a sort of scam, and he's doing it partly for money, but mainly he's doing it to get close to this rich young woman. The rich young woman has left town. She will not talk to either one of these men at the moment for various reasons. And the hero is now left with this guy who he only became friends with to either get money through, or frankly, to get to his girlfriend. Now he's just stuck with this guy. And this guy is a painter who is going through an emotional crisis. Our hero has become worried, sympathetic, fearing for the fate of this guy. And so he's trying to alert the girlfriend, who is out of town, that she should come back to talk to find out what's happening with this guy, because he seems to be having a breakdown. So the point is, having discovered that this guy is having a breakdown, the hero now needs to try and figure out how to contact this young woman who has left town. Actually left the country, but he doesn't know that yet. So I've got this. The point is, he's going to take 3 steps. The first step is he's going to go to her house. She's not there. So he goes to her parents' house, because he's met them once, and he thinks maybe they can get in touch with her. And they say, we're not allowed to give you any information. She's trying to stay away from you guys. And so he realizes that he has to go to this other guy who he thinks knows her. That's the shape of the scene. It's a fine scene. What I'm getting at is I don't know how to write it. So I started with I didn't want to say, the thing I don't want is a style in which you talk about, in which you say, like, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. So, for instance, instead of saying, I went down to Billy's townhouse, I just started with Billy's townhouse on 61st Street was closed up. No one was there to answer the bell. Now, this is a case where I'm saying the same thing several different ways, because I haven't quite found the phrase. I realized, I pictured, like, okay, this is a building. It's a townhouse on the Upper East Side of New York in the 1930s, and it's closed. There's no one there. The windows are dark, doors locked, etc., etc. I haven't quite decided how to describe that, but what I realized is if he peeks in the mail slot, he would see that the furniture is covered, which means she's moved out. She's gone for a long time. And then I wanted to get to that he goes over to her parents' house. Her parents actually live quite nearby, in this penthouse apartment. So I began to think, okay, so do I say I walked over there? And then I've got this section where I'm describing the fact that the doorman is not happy about this guy. He's a sort of shabby guy. He's an artsy bohemian guy. And they don't want to let him up. So the question is just like the Irish doorman, and I just wrote, I thought resplendent. What I wanted to have is a sense that this guy has a sense of this. The narrator has a sense of humor about his own shabbiness in this fancy place. But I don't know exactly. Like I don't exactly have a way of phrasing it. Like I could write. Let's see. Like, sorry, because I see a lot of questions here. I'm getting a little distracted. So the point is, I've got this discussion. I've got a section of the scene in which for instance, the doorman, resplendent in his uniform with the bread. Now the thing is, I wanted to say that this doorman is an Irish. He's a working class guy who is dressed up in this fancy uniform and defending the upper class. And so I was trying to use the language. This story is set in the 1930s, so I thought that he's our hero would say like Irishman, or See, I honestly don't have this. I know that he's got the character knows he has an observation of this other person. But exactly how do I'm feeling wrong about using long sentences. Defending upper class. So I've got these ideas, I've got these notions, but I don't have the words, the actual, like I could state it very plainly. I could just say, I felt uncomfortable around the doorman. I'm not feeling that that's right. And one of the things I want to talk about here is so this is the problem. And I feel relatively lucky because I have in the past, 30 years ago, when I was trying to learn how to be a screenwriter, I had this exact same problem, except it was in the screenplay language, a screenplay form. First of all, I hadn't seen 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was not that easy to see scripts. And I just didn't feel, and this is the main thing, confidence. In other words, you're making a choice. When you choose words, if I choose to say, like, I decided to, walk to the rich people's penthouse, there's like 25 different ways I could say that sentence. There isn't a right or wrong. There's only the choice you make, which should be in some way consistent with the style of the book as a whole. And I don't know the style of the book as a whole yet. I thought I did when I first started writing it. The first few chapters in which the character is describing his childhood and how he ended up in New York City, I got this kind of folksy, storytellerish voice, which I liked, but it wasn't appropriate for the rest of the story. It was things weren't dramatic enough. They were more judged at the distance. And I want to try and get the character into, I want the reader to feel the suspense of the moment, the frustration of the moment of trying to get to trying to get a message to this young woman. And the one thing I do know is that over time, and it took me, like my first scripts were incredibly difficult to write. Just to learn how to have a present tense, simple description wasn't easy. And the only way that I got it was doing it several times. The problem is I'm not going to write this novel several times. So the only thing I can do is chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph, try and solve the problem of right now. Like right now, in this scene that I'm talking about, I have a task to get through, which is I need to describe going to this building, meeting with this the character, the woman's mother, and being turned away. That's this section of the story. It's a page, maybe a page. And I've now got, as you can see here, I'll show you again. I have this, okay, so this scene goes, so I have all this, it goes up to about here. So this section of the story, I have written what happens, but I don't have the style. Elevator man was giving me the side eye. Now, I don't like that. But the point is, that's a possible way of saying it. Or it could be, I glanced at the elevator man, still waiting in his open elevator. Hope he was just waiting for the chance to give me, just waiting for the signal to give me the bum's rush. Bum's rush is a 1930s kind of phrase. And I like that. So the question is, how am I going to use the bums? Okay, this is the sort of thing I'm going to be going through. And eventually I will find the phrase that's a little wiseacre-y, a little, because this narrator, he's trying to have a certain tone of cocky outsider. So that's the sort of thing. Now I have this same sentence. I got it three times. None of those is right. What I'm going to do is come back to it later, look at the pieces of them, see if I can find the voice. Over time, what happens is you begin to get a couple of pieces, sentences here and there, that you go, that's it. That I figured it out. Like that, I recognize that voice as right for this story. And that's just, partly it's just a feeling, and the less confidence you have, the harder it is to even know when you get it right. This is a big problem, is that, and I've talked about this in my video on confidence, we actually need confidence in order to make our choices, in order to create, in order to think of things. You need to have some confidence that you're doing it correctly, that's something that you're going to like, or worst case is that you're worried about what other people like. More important, figure out what you like. I don't like this voice yet. I don't have it yet. But what I think I can, the way I'm going to be approaching it is simply to go over it piece by piece, try and find a relatively easy scene. I thought this would be easy. I got to say, I chose this chapter starting today. It's like, how hard could it be? I just have to say that this guy shows, like, I can picture the scene. I can, but in a screenplay, you can just say, like, he walks into the elevator lobby, it's marble, the doorman gives him a skeptical glance. And then somebody else takes care of the doorman's uniform and finding the right location, and the actor plays it, and you've got it there. In fiction, it's all in the voice, all in the choice of words. So the important thing to do is to try to find a voice that fits this story. I don't believe it should be like some people, you're going to find your voice and you're going to use it for every story you tell. cool. If you can do that, and if it works for that, the stories I'm telling, they kind of need different voices. So this particular story is first person narrated by a particular guy about a particular topic. And he's got to have a certain voice, and I haven't quite found it yet. What I figured out today as I was working was I think the sentences are too long. They're too, I think, like, this is feeling better. I stood in the marble floored elevator foyer. We didn't talk. There's something about that that's striking me as like, that's it. That's good. It can't all be short bits, but I do feel like my sentences are too long in a lot of this. So like even this, like in the dark, it's striking me as like there's too many little sub phrases, and I'm going to have to work on this later. I'm seeing that there's a lot of comments, so I'm a little distracted from the challenge I've got right here. But the one thing I wanted to say about this is, at least for me, and some people will feel the exact opposite, but for me, the idea of getting it perfect in one chapter and then using that as like a template doesn't work. The chapters are too different. As I said, my first 3 or 4 chapters of this book are great. The voice I've got there is great, but it doesn't fit the rest of the story. The story has many moods, and the mood that it begins with, which draws you in, I want to then change once things start happening, because there's sort of a long prologue in which we get our character into this romantic triangle. Once the romantic triangle starts, it's got a different tone, because he's not just sitting back judging, he's trying to dramatize. And that's where I don't quite have the voice. So I got it right, but the right isn't holding through the whole thing. The voice is going to be sort of transforming as it goes. The other thing is that because this is a story of somebody's coming of age, he's growing up, he's becoming a fuller person in the course of the story, I want his vision, his understanding of things to slightly develop as the story goes on. So for me, one of the biggest problems is you don't recognize that the problem is simply, I need to choose words. You think, oh, the story isn't right, I'm a bad writer, I haven't done enough research, whatever it is. But the answer is simply, you need to choose the words. And at very worst, what I may end up doing, I think sometimes I have done, is just get the facts down. Just get the thing to have as little style as possible, but get the flow of the events down clearly. And the other thing that I think you have to watch out for, because you think the problem is not choosing words, it's that I'm a bad writer, or that there's something I don't know yet. The answer is there isn't anything you can learn to solve this. You have to solve this to learn what you need to know. Solving the problem in the work is the only way to actually overcome this. And I've been kind of avoiding that. So that's why today I said, let's just talk about that. Part of the problem is we feel like our language should come naturally. Most of the time, if you're very self-conscious or shy, you might not feel confident in your language as you talk. But the truth is, most of the time, we assume that our language will come naturally. In writing, that doesn't always happen. It can happen if, like I said, if you've absorbed a certain style, if you sort of write like some very analytical person, or if you write like very conversational, if you're very Tarantino, whatever it is, that comes naturally to you. You say, oh, that's how you write. And if that works out, just do it. I don't know that Tarantino spends a lot of time questioning this. But if you are working in a form or a style in the project that isn't your natural language, it's very confusing. It's very disorienting. The answer is only, this is what I came to for myself today, is the answer is only going to be in your text. You are not going to find the answer somewhere else and then import it. You are not going to be able to, I mean, yes, you could read, Charles Dickens or Ernest Hemingway and say, okay, I'm just going to steal their style, which is fine. That is a completely acceptable. Most writers, consciously or not, do that. They say, I'm going to write like this. In this particular case, and I think it's partly just my nature, my self-conscious nature, I don't quite have that voice yet. It's literally a mechanical problem. But what I'm going to do is simply, the answer I've discovered is I need to spend more time on the page. Up until now, I've been doing very small bits of, I'll write something, I'll try to get a rough draft. Like in this case, I just wrote 3 versions of the description of the elevator man. And I just left it at that. So this thing is a baggy, sprawling mess. And what I've been trying to go is just go through it and clean it up. But eventually, the answer is only going to be finding a scene and finding the voice for that moment. Once I have it, it will begin to give me confidence for the others. But I can't just do it one at a time. I can't just say I'm going to stick to this chapter until I get it fixed. Every time I come at it, I need to sort of look at a new one and go, that one's not right. And right now, just getting the facts straight, getting the events straight, is the main job I've got. And then spending more time coming over it, getting to it more and more. All right, I've spent half an hour, and I don't want to ignore your questions and comments, so I'm gonna go to those. All right. Is it good advice for every character to be a foil so there's more conflict? Ghost Productions is asking, like with each with unique personalities, even if they are background characters. Okay. I believe yes and no. Yes, you definitely should give each background character, if possible, a bit of a unique personality. Give them a distinctive style. I believe that partly it's a distinctive style, partly it's a distinctive attitude towards the events, the situation, the other characters. But to say that you're going to do that so there's more conflict, I don't like that. Not everything is conflict. Not despite writing advice that your every scene should have a lot of conflict. That's actually not true. A lot of scenes between people don't have conflict. They have somebody trying to communicate to somebody else. They have somebody trying to help someone else. Lots of things are not conflict. But I do believe that the more distinctive each person in your story is, the better off your writing will be. The more that you will be having a good time. There's a building character arcs is a good one for this, and also my video character. Those two videos, I'll put links in the description when after this is done being live. Those two talk a lot about this concept that each of your characters, like if you've got a background character, they think they're in the middle of the story. They don't know they're a background character. And you may even, I find it easier to write, even if they don't do anything to show their difference. If you know their difference, it helps you to write each bit that they're doing, even if they're just a bodyguard, okay? Because there's bored bodyguards and there's hyper-vigilant bodyguards and there's, greedy all sorts of different bodyguards. You got to figure out which one is which one you're writing. So yes, I absolutely believe that it is a good idea. I don't understand the concept of a foil. I do understand the concept that they each have their own agenda. They each have their own thing they want out of the moment. Now, that may be just like to feel superior to the other people, or they may just want to be left alone. Whatever it is, that vibe will help you to write that character's interactions with the other characters. Good morning, Fung. Hello, Thomas Lewis. Hello, Next Institute. Sonia is finishing my revised editing outline today. Finish my third and hopefully final story draft. Wow, well, that is a lot. That is good. Okay, so Ghost Productions, more detail. I have a solid outline, but during the drafting, I realized the third act drifted from the theme, and I'm trying to fix that during my re-outline. That seems like a different problem than, but good if yes, if you've got an outline, it very often, this is something very important to remember. Just because you have an outline or a draft does not mean you have solved everything. You will very often say, oh, I wrote this whole scene, and that shows me when I look at it, when I read it later, that I didn't get it. That as you said, you drifted from the theme. Yes, absolutely. Since the 12 Monkeys ending was super inspiring for my theme. Okay, good. Glenn's Fan Club says, I have a similar problem. I figure out the premise and the rough advance of the story, but I have absolutely no idea how to meet the protagonist in the first page. Great. Here's the thing. In screenwriting, I know. In screenwriting, like I would say, you start with try and find an action or a visual or a moment, and you try and focus on that. But some people will say, I'm going to start with a little character summary. Joey is a well-off, eager bookie who is trying to become a restaurant owner, whatever it is. You might start with that and then say, but the main thing I would say is, in any writing problem for a narrative, try to figure out what the specific moment is. Don't worry about the big picture. Don't always worry about, how is this going to affect blah, 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 blah. What is this exact moment? So that's why I'm sort of, when I talk about this guy coming to this lobby and having the staff of the building wanting to keep him out, and that I know that can happen. I haven't figured out how to describe it. Anyway. That was today's topic. Ghost Productions, though, Beau is Afraid and Better Call Saul and Vince Gilligan are big inspirations. Each word and character serves a purpose of the larger story. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Better Call Saul and Beau is Afraid are actually notorious for the amount of time they spend apparently not telling the story, taking forever to get to a story event because they are luxuriating in the characters or in some little side quest. So it's interesting that you see that. There's certain concepts, like every word serves a purpose to the larger story, or there's conflict. And I try to avoid those kind of cliches because they make you spin your wheels generalizing. I think both Beau is Afraid and Better Call Saul are great examples of work that does not every single second be serving the story. In fact, they will go off in tangents. They will spend half an hour getting a long roundabout way to a character doing something. So yes, it serves a purpose, but that purpose may be the enjoyment of the tangent. I like random background characters that become important later on. That's good writing. I agree. A lot of background. Yes, absolutely. I remember first seeing the Millennium Falcon's jump to hyperspace. Can that ever be described by be satisfied describing it in words. No, absolutely not. You can try, like, this is one of the biggest problems with screenwriting, which is you are going to be, like, if you've done it right, your words will have a texture and an excitement that you'll say, like, there's a, like, describing the hyperspace, and I don't even know if that's bothered, because I'm not sure how much George Lucas had to sell that moment, because he was planning to direct it himself and he knew the visual he was trying to get. But there is no set of words that will create a visual or motion or sound experience. The best you can do, and I think you can do this, is find exciting sentences that have some style and magic to themselves, but recognize that that's going to be left behind by the movie itself. Likewise, performances. You just cannot describe a performance. All right. Can't a screenplay have different points of view too? Can A story and B story have different protagonists? Yes. Yes, Sanchez Pablo. The screenplay can switch from characters, but the point of view of the language is almost always screenwriting language. In other words, screenplays may describe, may follow a different character and their point of view. However, the language, it's very unusual to see the writing style change from section to section in a screenplay. Usually the language of a screenplay is relatively straightforward, sort of descriptive storytelling. Trying to, a screenplay will simply, like, here, let's just do this. This will be somewhat entertaining. I'm going to just take this scene. Let's see if I can write it in screenplay language, which I am good at. Okay, so interior, rich apartment building, lobby. Oh, sorry. Day. Doorman looks up as Tom enters. The doorman looks up as Tom enters. Okay, so now let's make that the doorman in his elaborate uniform and behind his formal desk looks up as Tom enters. Shabby and out of place in the big marble lobby. Okay. Then the doorman would say, "Can I help you, sir? Can I help you? Help you? Can I help you? Help you?" And to see Mrs. Gruenberg. Penthouse. Oh man, she expecting you? So the point is, it is not hard to do this. Then if I wanted to get into a little bit more of the, a little bit more. So let's make this. Grimaces with So then we would add like, out. Smallness. So I would like add this little pause. Obviously, this is not screenplay format, but in other words, you would make the scene happen. And what you'd find is very often in a scene like this, you would cut as much as you can. You'd see if there's any way to get rid of the scene entirely and get right to the Mrs. Grunberg. In this case, you can't. But in a novel, there's a different kind of flow. The question then is, do you have the point of view? Well, okay, in this scene where I just wrote it, there is no point of view. I'm not either in Tom's point of view or the doorman's. In fact, the description is focused on the doorman's judging of Tom, but I'm not writing it from the doorman's point of view. I'm writing it from the third person describing the scene. In a novel, especially in the novel that I'm writing, I have the problem that I am writing in the point of view of one of the characters, and he is narrating this from a time in the future. He's looking back on these events. So I can't just make things happen. I have to talk about it through a point of view. In other words, Tom is remembering this doorman. And I haven't, I don't think I want to say, I remember this doorman was a jerk. I could do that, but that's not the storytelling voice I want. But it's a possibility. And I'm going to be trying different points. Screen format, you don't have a point of view. You are third person describing the motion picture, describing the scene, and allowing the point of view of the characters to play out in how they behave. That is the difference. And that is where I am struggling with writing a novel, because it's very, very complicated. Okay, so Ghost Productions. I'm curious. The things you are all saying, they don't seem like problems. They seem like fair. Try, if you want to have it be hyper stylized, have it be hyper stylized. This is absolutely cool. You should do what you are doing. The main answer that I would have to the original question is, do you want your characters to be vivid and unique, even if they are minor people? Yes. Okay. Allison Garcia says, sorry, what is the Upper East Side? Part of New York is flying in the sky. I apologize. The Upper East Side in New York City is a neighborhood which, especially in the 1930s, was a wealthy neighborhood. That's the only thing that refers to. It's there was the West Side, the East Side, there's downtown, there's uptown, and there's various different neighborhoods, Chelsea, Greenwich Village. The Upper East Side happens to be a particular neighborhood which is full of wealthy apartment buildings. Okay. I think it's realistic. Red cheeks and nose in a uniform. That's actually good. Thank you, Hasko. Yeah. Okay. 1930s Irishmen in the U.S. would have some religious edge, I'd say. Yes, that's true. But remember, we're only having a moment. Like this is an interesting thing. The doorman is not important. The doorman is simply an obstacle to our hero talking to the woman he needs to talk to, who is herself an obstacle to the real conversation, which is with the young woman whose parents he is visiting. Okay. Lake Filter says there's nothing wrong with writing long sentences to talk about something in irony or something like that. Praise at face value with an underlining Makata. No, there isn't anything wrong with it. I'm not saying any of this is good or bad. I'm saying I'm trying to find the right voice for this story and character. This guy, I just don't think he writes in long, elaborate, Henry Jamesy kind of sentences. So I'm not in any way suggesting that there is a right or wrong voice. In fact, that's the problem. In raising this question, what I've tried to say is The problem is that there is no right or wrong, so therefore you have to figure out your choice. That is paralyzing. And it's especially paralyzing because until you recognize that that is the name of the game, that the point here is to experiment and explore. This is the message I'm trying to pass on as I point out where I'm stuck, is that I have not experimented enough yet. I have not sat down with this text and say, okay, let's try writing it very short sentences and very, very plain. The doorman was in my way. I wanted to get past him. That's one way. The other one is to sort of describe this ironic, funny thing. It may be that there's just no room for the doorman. I don't know yet. What I'm saying is that the only way to figure out your style, to choose the words, which is what style is, choosing this word over that word, this sentence, phrase, this way of writing a paragraph over that one. That is the only thing that you have to work with. And it is not a matter of right or wrong. You have to make a choice. And the hardest part, I think, of that is to know that that's what you're doing, because it feels like you're just not getting it. Like that there's a right like there's a right answer and you're not getting it. That's not what's happening. What's happening is you haven't made your choice. You haven't found the thing you believe in enough to commit to it. That's the key. Finding something that you like enough, that you feel comfortable enough and you believe in enough to make the choice to commit to it, knowing that you can't be sure if it's right or wrong. That is the game for writing. Especially for writing fiction, which is what I'm talking about today, more than screenwriting. Screenwriting has a fairly common stylistic path. Because you can't, there's a lot of stylistic rhetorical tricks that you're not allowed to use in screenwriting that you can use in fiction writing. Fung says, talking about drama, recently I started watching Hitchcock movies. It doesn't have much happening on the surface in each scene, but somehow it's super tense. How did he do that? It depends on the scene, but I think the main thing that Hitchcock did was he knew what the scene was about. In other words, he will have a subtextual issue, and then he will have people performing through their needs. In other words, the idea that someone is trying to figure out if someone else is poisoning them. Someone is trying to figure out if someone is lying to them. Someone is trying to figure out where the jewels are. Whatever it is, they are trying to do something. And that is usually where the suspense comes from, because they can't go straight at it. Almost always in a Hitchcock movie, someone can't go straight at the problem. There's some obstacle which is keeping them, or some social requirement or some threat. In other words, they can't just say, where are the jewels, because they'll get caught as a jewel thief, that kind of thing. So there's always some reason that they can't just say it. And Hitchcock is very, very good at being very specific about what the task is. Like in Rear Window, the first task is essentially for a man of action, a man of experience in the world who's trapped in his apartment because he's got a broken leg, is how can he entertain himself? So he starts watching out through the window at other people. And then he begins to suspect one of the other people he's watching of a crime. So then the clarity of, I cannot leave my apartment, but I suspect a guy from across the way of doing something violent. How can I find that out? And then you start to think steps towards the goal that is very clear. And each step is very clear. Can I see this? Can I send someone out for that? Whatever it is, there's going to be steps, and each step is specific. That's why how I'd say how Hitchcock did what he did. Bomb under the table, giving the audience information the characters don't have. That certainly is part of it. Often, in other words, one of Hitchcock's main tricks is to to give the audience a piece of information, like there's a bomb under the table, or but like Rear Window, that's actually not the case. We don't know for sure. And then we get little clues. So different stories, different techniques. I would suggest, by the way, if you're interested in how Hitchcock did what he did, he's very, very explicit about it in a book of interviews with Francois Truffaut called Truffaut/Hitchcock. The book is called Truffaut/Hitchcock. It is a series of interviews in which Truffaut and Hitchcock discussed every single one of Hitchcock's movies in chronological order up until the point that he had gotten to. He still had a few movies left to make, but he analyzed. Hitchcock, who loves to talk about his craft, analyzes the tricks of his trade. Anyone who's interested in Hitchcock must read Truffaut/Hitchcock. Actually, maybe it's Hitchcock. I think it's Hitchcock Truffaut. Sorry about that. Okay. Also, why are they so romantic? Because he often was telling stories in which the romantic and the suspenseful were like is just stories of romantic suspense, stories of suspense in which a love story had a dark, criminal, or frightening element to it. Sometimes it's romantic because someone may be bad, dark, hidden, have a dark side to them, but they are also in some way attractive or romantically interesting. 1930s Irishman would come from potato famine around that time, then straight into the Depression. He'd be hungry for something, wants something badly, perhaps tries to get another job. That's true, but the Irishman is just the doorman. He's just I was just mentioning that he was Irish because it was a commonplace job that Irish immigrants were allowed to have in New York at that time. These are all very, very true, but you're not understanding that the main character is not the Irishman. The Irish character is simply someone he is encountering who is actually of the work. The point about that was that he is a working class immigrant character protecting the upper class, and that at the time most of the Irish immigrants were not upper class; they were working class or less. Michael says, when I edit scenes, I look at objects around the room, a chair, a table, maybe what's on it. It sort of describes what the character is present in this space. Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things I was getting at in this scene. In order to suggest the imposingness, the obstacleness of the doorman, I was describing his uniform and the setting of the lobby. Format question. If I have a character on the phone talking that is not physically present in the scene, how do I write it? Do I write VO to indicate that he is not there? Yes, absolutely. You can write VO or you can write on phone. But yes, in other words, when you are describing the character, you put like, Jerry, and then you put on phone in parentheses as a part of that character heading. The other way you can do that is if you don't want to put that on every single line, Jerry on phone or Jerry VO, that you would simply start the scene by saying, Jerry, we only hear Jerry's voice, he is on the phone. And then you put a colon and then all the dialogue, we know that Jerry's only doing a voice. By the way, I personally would not use VO. VO suggests voiceover, which is an actual film technique in which a character is their dialogue or their thoughts are layered over a sound layer, which is not the same as a person who's talking on the phone or off camera. So I personally like to say on phone so that we are clear, because a voiceover would not be filtered and a phone conversation would probably be somewhat filtered to sound like it's going through the phone. A voiceover is actually a technique only used by the film itself. In other words, the film is allowing a layer of narration. That's what voiceover tends to be. Don't you also need to indicate what they are wearing in a screenplay when you introduce the characters? Almost never. You can, but it doesn't, and unless what they're wearing is very specifically helpful to the scene. If you know that a certain character is a stockbroker, you might not bother to describe them wearing a fancy suit. If you're describing what every single character wears, you're over directing in your screenwriting, because the truth is, unless the characters, like if you say like Phil walks in wearing a bathing suit, well, that's important because that's something, unless they're on the beach, in which case if they're on the beach, you assume everyone's in bathing suits. If someone's not in a bathing suit, you want to say Phil walks to the shore wearing a three-piece suit. That's important because it's out of context. But if you're telling a story about, somebody playing tennis, you don't have to say what they're wearing in their tennis outfit. They're going to be wearing whatever the costume designer and the director decide are appropriate for that character's clothing on the tennis court. All you need to say is Joe and Sam are playing tennis. We are going to assume that they are in tennis appropriate clothing. You do not need to describe every bit of what everyone is wearing. It's very tempting to describe every character's clothing, but the truth is it slows down the read. So you only want to describe clothing or anything else if it relates to something that's either unexpected or unusual or something that will be used in the plot. For instance, if somebody comes in and they're wearing a beautiful beige suit or a beige dress, and then they're going to get wine spilled on it, that's important that you know that it's beige and not like a dark red dress where the wine wouldn't show up. Exactly. Depends on how detailed you want to be. But remember, if you are providing detail at a high level in a script, you are slowing down the action of the script. And the action of the script is far more important. My protagonist speaks German in New York. Does it count as a different voice? Well, that depends. Are you writing a screenplay or a novel? Because what I was talking about here was the voice in fiction. In a novel, in a script, if they're speaking German, you have to indicate that they're speaking German. You have to also indicate what they're saying in English. If it's an American movie, if it's a German movie, then just you have to indicate that the other people are not speaking German. But the answer is, if someone is speaking a different language in a screenplay, you need to indicate that. It does not change the way you describe the buildings or the people or the action if someone's speaking German. You wouldn't say, you don't have a different voice in the way you're writing your script. You simply have that character speaking differently. Hello, Milton JG. Good day to you from Northern Australia. Yes, I am talking about story voice in general. It is about this. It is about a different form. Right, exactly. What I was trying to get at here is screenwriting has a very specific story tone. So, like, if you're writing science fiction novels or romance novels, there will be a variety of current styles that are popular. You have to decide if you're going to use those, but in screenwriting, then the choices are very narrow. The reason I was describing this was because I am a very, very experienced writer in screenwriting. I don't have a problem writing description or getting scenes to happen in a script. What I thought was interesting to talk about here is that someone who spent 30 years becoming extremely fluent in a certain style, if you put that person in a different style, back to square one, that I am suffering from the exact same panic and insecurity that a novice writer would, or I did as a novice writer, even though I am highly, highly experienced in writing in one form. What I thought was interesting about that was to suggest that what's required for anyone is getting comfortable with the specific form you are writing in, and recognizing that it's not that you can't write or that you're even a bad writer. It's simply you haven't made a choice to use a certain voice, and you haven't gotten familiar with that voice, with that style. For instance, hard-boiled American detective fiction has a very specific style that a series of writers, Dashiell Hammett, Cornell Woolrich, Raymond Chandler, a whole bunch of writers perfected or invented a certain style of writing fiction. They're actually very different from each other. Chandler and Hammett are extremely different from each other. But the point is, each one developed a certain style. If you read a lot of their stuff, if you read James Ellroy, any of the hard-boiled writers, you will begin to gather a sense of that voice, and you will internalize it. You will become fluent in that language. What I'm saying is anything you write is a language, and you shouldn't be upset with yourself if you are not fluent, because the only way to get fluent is to A, study it, and B, practice it. That is what I was trying to show you that I'm just at the beginning of. I have not yet perfected this voice. And in particular, in a very simple scene. In a more elaborate intellectual scene, like I have some scenes where the character is just describing a painter's struggles and it's all internal, I'm actually doing much better with those. This is a very practical scene, and for some reason, practical things are unnerving me in fiction. So that's why I was trying to write it. The important thing that I'm trying to teach here is, if you are struggling with your writing, if you find that you know what you want to say, but you can't get it, that is a style problem. It's a language problem, choosing words, and that the only solution to that is to recognize that that it is that the problem is that you haven't chosen your language yet. And you may not, you may decide, okay, I'm going to do it sort of Dashiell Hammett-y, or I'm going to do it sort of J.R.R. Tolkien-y. Whatever it is, you can do that. I am getting a certain amount. I've been reading a bunch of different styles, but I'm also trying to just learn. You need to practice in specific with your words in your story in order to get comfortable. You won't be comfortable right away. You have to learn to work uncomfortably until it begins to get comfortable. That's the lesson I was trying to provide is, if you are finding that you know what you want to say, but you are not getting, it's not working, don't panic about that. Recognize that that's a matter of language. That's a matter of choosing words. You know what you want to say, you know what's going to happen, but you have to decide how to choose the words. There's many ways to do that. The first thing to do is recognize that's what you're working on. One thing you can do is say, okay, whose words do I like that kind of sound like the way I like this to do? And sort of try and use their voice. It'll come out differently for yourself. Don't worry about it. That's not stealing. That's like saying, if you like a certain style of filmmaking, like the Safdie brothers, they use a lot of handheld cameras. If you like that and you use a handheld camera, you're not stealing something, you're using that language. Okay, lots of different people use handheld cameras. The Safdies have a certain bunch of things they do which give their film a specific voice. Their filmmaking has a specific style. The same is true of words. And what I was trying to say is, the first thing you have to do when you're stuck at the words is recognize what the problem is, so that you don't go trying to solve it by getting your characters to be better, saying, I got this character down. I know what's going to happen in this scene. It's a really easy scene. My problem is the words. And the first thing I need to do is just say, okay, at least I know the problem. Now let me try some different solutions. Let me try writing this hard-boiled. Let me try writing this ironic and comical. And as I work through it, I'll say, that doesn't seem like the same guy who's in the rest of the story. I'm going to have to change that. The more you do this, the more that will become familiar, you will begin to say, that's how this guy talks. That's how this novel talks. And that voice is crucial to the ability to write comfortably. And that's all I was talking about, was the amount of discomfort we feel because we don't have our style confident and comfortable, and that the solution to that is to become aware that it's true, to think consciously about what elements of your style there are, and then apply them, practice them in scenes. Okay. Haskell says, one of my favorite lines from Max Frisch, Faber in Havana. Those Americans in their rosy sausage skin, they think they are free, but they're just loud. Don't shoot, literally. No problem. Absolutely. Okay, yeah, let's look at this because this is interesting. Okay. For instance, in this little quote here that Haskell's telling us, those Americans in their rosy sausage skin. Okay. He could say, I don't like those Americans, or he looked at those Americans, but it doesn't, just says those Americans. So we're in the voice of the person making the judgment. And it's a very plain language, as opposed to Faber sat on the beach and considered the Americans. He felt that they were, in other words, that's a different voice. By the way, I love that line. That's great. I get it. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is that there's a, for instance, that first sentence isn't technically a sentence. Those Americans in their rosy sausage skin. There's no verb, but that is how people think. In other words, he's giving us a sentence fragment to say, this is what I am judging. And then he gives the judgment in the second sentence. Beautiful style. Those Americans, like, we're in the guy's head. We are in this person judging these Americans. That is absolutely great. The point is that is a specific stylistic choice to not use a complete sentence. There's no verb. Those Americans in their rosy sausage skin. What about them? What do they do? What are we understanding? But because of the way that we think and the way that we read, we understand this is this guy's observation, and then his next sentence is his judgment. Okay. Any tips on writing about a real historical event? I'm very interested in Grover Cleveland's first presidential election campaign. I don't want to adopt his point of view, but also the media. Well, first, Bruno, are you writing a screenplay or a fiction? Because that'll be a very big difference. My tips for writing a real historical event are, A, try to make sure that you've both got a layer of research. In other words, that you show, like in a presidential election campaign, what is a speaking event? What is a whistle stop? What describe what the things are that we would not be familiar with. And then you have to think about the translation of the historical mindset. That's the thing that when you're talking about history, and this is sort of what I was talking about in my story about talking about the Irish doorman, you are trying to describe, to convey a different way of living and thinking. The best way, I think, in most historical dramas and fiction is to do it through the interaction of characters. That's the key. Is it to take your observations? Oh, there's a class hierarchy in New York City in apartment buildings, and to say, how can I show that with a specific character interacting with another specific character? That's what tends to make historical stuff come alive, is that you're taking your thoughts and you're putting them in places where we understand it by people. Because you could just generalize, you could just tell the story of the presidential campaign and say, well, they did this and they did that. But we're not going to get involved the way historical fiction gets us involved, which is by taking a character and traveling with them, or a series of characters, and seeing how they interact. And in those interactions, they give us information. Lake Filter on having different voices. By the way, we have to stop. I got to go. Funnily enough, it sounds like we're working on the same book. The same problem. Cool. Okay. Why do you feel like your story Why do I feel like your story is so Woody Allen-ish? Yeah, it's probably a New York thing. New York. My story isn't actually Woody Allen-ish, but I dig the vibe. What you're saying is Woody Allen tends to talk about relationships and New York City, so that would make sense. Okay. How can my language come naturally when my mother language is Spanish? I write in English. Well, Campos Roberta, first of all, is it, first of all, why do you write in English if your language is Spanish? Is because of there's an English language market? I would personally, and I don't know because I've never written in another language, either the more you work in English, you'll get more natural, especially if you're doing something specific like screenwriting. I don't know if you are, if you're not writing screenplays, it gets more complicated. But the answer is, when I say something comes naturally, I mean it comes easily because of familiarity. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. I mean it comes naturally in that you're not thinking, how do I say this? The words come into your head. And the answer is practice. The more that you practice, the more that you study, the more that things will come naturally. That is not in any way to say that that natural stuff is good. It's not necessarily good. It's just a question of whether or not, like what I was trying to describe was what happens when it's not coming naturally because of my uncertainty and fear and self-consciousness, that I have a layer of trouble between me and the work, which is that I am not sure of my choices. If the choices that you will make in English as a Spanish speaker, that will be your style, and that's okay. If it's not okay, I would suggest try writing it in Spanish, get it as good as you can, and then see about translating it. Okay, I'm going to have to go soon. I'm sorry, we're running late. Spoken language and written language are actually two different things. Absolutely. I am not talking about speaking language. I'm talking about written language. Often when you're writing something, you are writing something that someone is saying. But yes, writing and speaking are quite different. Tarantino spends a lot of time watching movies, not writing. So does Sean Baker. Guy has registered much more than 2,000 movies in his Letterboxd account. Yeah. Anybody who does any art form, in theory, they're going to spend a lot of time consuming that art form. That's how you develop your language. That's how you develop your skills, is A, absorbing as much as you can so that you have possibilities in your head, and then B, practicing, doing it yourself. Okay. So you never read a Charles Dickens novel? No, I've read 10 or so Charles Dickens novels, a couple of them more than once. Why did I not? I didn't say I've never read a Charles Dickens novel. I said this can't sound like one. Are there any elements we should pay attention to when changing the voice from the first part more descriptive to the second part more dramatic? Thank you. I'm not sure. Do you mean in my story? In my story, are there any elements we should pay attention to when changing the voice? The elements that I'm getting at is I have not. Yes, the elements are how do you tell a story? How do you describe events through a person's recollection? That's what I'm struggling with. Just because it's different people speak different ways, and I don't quite have this guy's voice yet. Is trying to communicate a conflict, because you only try when someone is not listening. Yes, that's fair. Is trying to communicate a conflict. Yes. However, sometimes scenes are about communicating. In other words, it's not about trying and failing to communicate. It's actually about like I just watched something, and there was some scenes where people communicated well. And that was really important. It was a breakthrough from them. So that scene is not a scene of conflict. It's a scene of resolving a conflict, of being able to communicate, of finally being able to get someone to listen. And then once they do, you find that you have something in common in this case, or you give somebody something useful. My point is that scene may not be about conflict. There may be scenes when they're not communicating, but if there are also possibly scenes where they communicate. Okay. Angelique says, I'm dealing with the exact same writing struggle. My prologue has a vastly different tone than the rest. It's intentional, I like it, but it makes decisions for later parts hard to make. Same here. What I'm discovering about that, and my point about this is that I got one tone, I don't have the other tone. Once I have the other tone, I'll say, oh, that's what this is. And then I'll be able to write the other tone. Right now, I thought my prologue was going to be the voice for the whole thing. So I got that right, and then I just started to plot out, like to get the plot, but I didn't worry about the voice. And when I started to write it, I was like, oh, damn, this voice isn't working for that. So the answer is, the thing that you did to get the first one right, you can also get for the second one right once you are aware that it's two different things. Have you spoken with an editor or another author about the relationship with an editor? I have not. No. Okay. My protagonist is a Secretary of State. She is always swarmed by journalists whenever she appears in public. Do I need to name them when they are not in political power? No, you do not. If you have a character who is swarmed by journalists and they are just shouting out questions and there's none that particularly carry through into a relationship, you can just say reporter 1, reporter 2, reporter 3. On background characters, I typically adopt main characters from my other works as a template for those characters. That's a cool trick. Yeah, why not? Some people adopt characters from other people's work. Some people, take a character that you've used before and you kind of use them as the template for your next character. That's a cool trick. Okay, I'm sorry, no more questions. Ghost Productions is also just answering that. What do you think about Christopher Nolan saying first-time screenwriters should always write film noir? I think his point was it's a nice defined genre with a very specific set of needs and style, and it just makes it easier. It could be, Christopher Nolan likes film noir, so he said that. It could be Westerns, it could be whatever. The answer is, when you are a first-time writer, it's not a bad thing to work within a specific genre just to narrow down your choices. That gets to the point I was making before. One of the worst things about being creative is having a lot of choices. That it's so much easier if you are working in a specific defined style or genre or whatever, because then you can say, well, that's not going to work because it's not in that style. Having too many possibilities is the worst thing that can happen to a creative person. Bo is Afraid is unabashedly picaresque. Absolutely. But as a result, the styles of the 4 sections of Bo are very distinctly different. And that what I'm getting at is that if you were writing Bo is Afraid, you would need to think about what is the style of each section. For me, Lau Kar Lung is a huge inspiration. His kung fu movies are always a 3-way conflict, kind of complicated, somehow a load of information condensed into less than a minute. Cool, I've never seen any of those movies. Okay. Where is George Lucas now? Haven't heard of him in a long time now. Junior Henry Kane. George Lucas is currently spending most of his time building his museum. He's got a museum that is opening next year in Los Angeles called the Museum of Narrative Art. He sold Star Wars and no longer is involved in the development of Star Wars. He is no longer making movies, at least at the moment. He spent a lot of time developing his business, the Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound. And now he has spent the past, 10 years, I think, focused on building this amazing new museum in Los Angeles. Have you read the story that Wim Wenders' actor worked as a janitor in order to understand his janitor character? How do we do that when we have a terrorist character? We can't be a terrorist. That is true. There are certain things you should not learn by doing? The answer is, first of all, remember, actors and writers are different, but writers also need to do research. And the answer would be, do as much research as you can through the testimony of terrorists, stories of catching or hunting or analysis of terrorists, and anything that terrorists have written by themselves, read it. Ghost Productions is saying screenwriting has a kind of omniscient point of view. Yes, that is what I'm saying, is that screenwriting does have a specific, fairly omniscient point of view. And that means that if you get good at that, it's very hard to do another thing, which is what I was getting at. Should I create characters in a world building specifically to fit the theme, or should I create them however I want and filter the theme through them? I personally believe that you should work however you feel best working. If you are going to create whatever you want and then find what it means, just give yourself time to do that. I personally like to choose my story more than theme, but your theme is related to your story. Your story and your theme first, or develop them as you do the research and the creation of the characters and the world building, because otherwise what you're going to find is that you may invent things that don't fit the story. And so you'll have this thing that you invented that you want in the story, but there's no place for it. The example I gave and I should tell you that I did a video on world building. I would suggest you watch it. And also one on character, which talks about that. Hold on. There we go. Character. And I will put links to these in the description. But my basic answer is, think of it like, a movie set. You could describe like the whole building, right? You could describe every room in a house, but if the action doesn't go into those other rooms, it doesn't matter how much you've perfected what the bedroom wall looks like if there's never going to be a scene in the bedroom. So for me, working on the world building and the characters with your story and your ideas helps you to make sure that you're not going to invent something that you can't get into the story. Sorry, what is the meaning of feel his smallest? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what that refers to. Is it something I wrote? Did I wrote feel his smallest? If so, I didn't mean to. But I mean, the idea, I'm sorry, I don't know what that refers to. You can't be a terrorist, but you could imagine being so angry at someone as to feel irrational violence is the only way to express this, and to go from there to rationalize such behavior. Sonia is very, very right about this. When you are imagining a character who is very, very different than you in terms of their technical details, their feelings, their experience is probably something you can share. And that is, you may not, as Sonia said, you may not be a terrorist, but you can think about what it would be like to feel something is so unjust or unfair, or that you are so helpless or so angry that you decide to do something violent. That is something that you can work from your own imagination and your own experiences and amplify them. But then at the same time, as far as research goes, if you want to understand what a specific type of terrorist is, you want to learn about their beliefs, their experiences, etc., through research. Agree that you can't imagine yourself into unfamiliar characters through your own parallel experiences. You can also agree that you can imagine yourself in unfamiliar character through using your parallel experiences and feelings. You can also read autobiographies and biographies and interviews. Yes, Milton JG is also right. Absolutely. Lauren Benny says, you gave me an idea to write a screenplay about a screenwriting teacher and a rebellious screenwriting student arguing what words to use in a screenplay and structure who'd like the movie Amadeus. That sounds great. That sounds fun. That's good stuff. Who says Allison can't be a terrorist? We're going to ask Allison not to be a terrorist. Shouldn't be. Yes, fair enough. Any chance we can spoof Hitchcock movies. Yes, of course. Mel Brooks did it. He did a movie called High Anxiety, total spoof of Hitchcock movies. I had no intention to be in terrorist, Allison says. Strong intention to write a thriller antagonist that's a terrorist. Fair. Michael saying, talk about Name of the Rose. There's a section of mathematical formulas that breaks up the narrative but shows the logic behind the investigation. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Different fiction goes in all sorts of different ways. Absolutely. Yeah. What's astonishing is how many ways fiction can tell a story. Okay. Sorry. I gotta go. I'm late. Lucy says, Joan Didion's book, The Last Thing He Wanted, is a masterclass in style, not for the sake of style, but feeling inherently part of the rhythm of the narrative. I love this, but feel I fail at my own take. Well, Lucy, A, I'm going to take a look at that because I've never read it. And B, use the styles that you love to inspire you and to learn their mechanics, their techniques, but don't compare. Don't compare yourself to anyone else's writing. Simply try and make your own take work better. If you're feeling like your take isn't working, find out why specifically your take doesn't feel as good. If it's just a general feeling, it's not that good, that may just be a feeling. It may be fine. I don't know. I don't know specific answers, but I would say one of the things you want to do is when you are admiring someone else's style, do not then compare yourself to it. You want to take on their vibe, their mechanics, their tricks, but you do not want to imitate specifically, and you do not want to compare. Those are not healthy for being creative. Okay, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I can't stay. Is it possible to over-describe in a screenplay? Yes, absolutely. You're saying you feel like you both over-describe and under-describe. That's not... There is, I will try and find it, but I did a live stream about how to describe in scripts. And I will try to find it and put a link to it. But the answer is yes. In general, do not describe a lot in screenplays. Describing is not valuable in screenplays. Tying description to action is very valuable. If your description has something to do with what's happening, that is vital. If you are just describing, you are probably wasting everyone's time. Okay. Sorry. Gotta go. Conflict-wise, Jack Bickham popularized a useful idea: scene and sequel. Scenes have goals, sequels have... Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the scene and sequel thing. I understand it. I just feel like when you apply any pattern like that, your writing tends to get predictable. I don't like that. Okay. That's it. I gotta go. I apologize for not having more clarity, but I sure hope to see you next week. Go write something.